So glad you're all here this morning. For those of you joining online, we're glad you're here as well with us. Thank you all for trusting us with your Sunday. Alongsiders are a people practicing the way of love through the art of living alongside for the sake of neighbor, creation, and self. And this morning as we gather, Jeff, if you can put the slide up on the screen, we have a rhythm that we move through. We begin with singing to center our affections on God and connect us with our bodies and with each other. We take the sacrament of the Eucharist together to remind us how deeply loved we are and to hold space for others that are outside these walls, maybe for each other. We spend time listening to a reflection to stir our hearts and encourage and form our lives in faith, hope, and love for and with God. And we spend a time after that interacting and engagement to process what God may be stirring up in our lives as we prepare for a new week ahead of us. So again, we're so glad that you're here. My name's John. I'm a member of the team here. Dennis, Peter, Carmen, thank you so much for leading us this morning. Sing as you're comfortable, if that means standing, if that means sitting, however you can reach and experience the presence of God this morning, do so.
Thank you, John. As we begin our time in song, let's just read this prayer out together. Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise. Let us come into God's presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise. Amen. Beyond the end, before beginning, eternal one, creator God, you made the world and it was good. All in all, self-sufficient, so high above, but never distant, made for your love. Fashioned from dust, you gave us breath, and it was good. And all glory and honor, blessing and power, because your name alone is worthy, worthy forever. The praise is yours. Oh, the praise is yours. Face, separated, betrayed your heart, our glory faded, went our own way, gave up on love, but you were not, for you are good. You sent your son for our forgiveness, you ran to us, kept your promise, light of the world, there on a cross, you drank the cup, for you are good, and all glory and honor, blessing and power, be blessing and power, because your name alone is worthy, worthy forever. The praise is yours. Yes, Lord. And all glory and honor, blessing and power, because your name alone is worthy, worthy forever. The praise is yours. All the praise is yours. Won't you lift him up right now? 'Cause all the praise is yours, Lord. We praise you, Jesus. And all glory and honor, blessing and power, because your name alone is worthy, worthy forever. The praise is yours. We praise you, Lord. Lord, you search me, and how you know me. You perceive my every thoughts from afar, and all my wandering, still you love me. And King of glory, you pursue my anxious heart. Even when I'm not your faithful, even when I doubt your truth thoughts, and even when I'm lost, you won't let me go. But when my heart is dry, your grace flows. No matter where I run, I'm not far from home, and I may be weak, but you're able. Even when I'm not, you're faithful. And even when I'm not, you're faithful. Lord, you search me, and how you know me. You perceive my every thought from afar, and all my wandering, still you love me. And King of glory, you pursue my anxious heart. Oh Lord, even when I'm not your faithful, even when I doubt your truth thoughts, and even when I'm lost, you won't let me go. No matter where I run, I'm not far from home, and I may be weak, but you're able. And even when I'm not, you're faithful. And even when I'm not, you're faithful. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I hide from your face? Where can I flee from your presence? Where would I go? Where would I go? If I rise to the heavens, you're with me. If I fall to the depths of the sea, even there it's your hand that will lead me. Wherever I go, wherever I go. And where can I go from your spirit? Where can I hide from your face? Where can I flee from your presence? Where could I go? Where would I go? If I rise to the heavens, you're with me. If I fall to the depths of the sea, even there it's your hand that will lead me. Wherever I go, wherever I go. Even when I'm not your faithful, even when I doubt your truth thoughts, and even when I'm lost, you won't let me go. When my heart is dry, your grace flows. No matter where I run, I'm not far from home, and I may be weak, but you're able. Even when I'm not, you're faithful. Even when I'm not, you're faithful. Sing again. Even when I'm not, you're faithful. Even when I doubt your true thoughts, and even when I'm lost, you won't let me go. When my heart is dry, your grace flows. No matter where I run, I'm not far from home, and I may be weak, but you're able. Even when I'm not, you're faithful. Even when I'm not, you're faithful. Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Right here, right now. And Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. And the Holy Spirit, you are here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Where can I go from your spirit? And where can I hide from your face? Where can I flee from your presence? Where would I go? Where would I go? If I rise to the heavens, you're with me. If I fall to the depths of the sea, even there it's your hand that will lead. Wherever I go, wherever I go. And the Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence is here right now, and we lift you up, oh Lord. Sing again. And Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Oh Lord, your presence is here. Well, as we know that God's presence in this place, let's just take a moment right now, wherever you're at, let's just stand and just be present with those around us. Say hello to someone next to you. Say hello to someone maybe far from the other end. But let's just take that moment right now and pass the peace.
So all year we've been reflecting on being a people practicing. Just practicing. This is what our life is. It's you get up every day and you try again. This morning I'd like to spend a few minutes speaking about what it means for me, what it may mean for us to be a people practicing just presence, just the practice of being here. And afterwards, we'll spend a little time, as I mentioned up front, with each other as we take Eucharist together and pray for each other, as well as engage with what the challenges might be for you and I as we practice presence. It's ironic for me that I'm speaking on practicing presence because when I was young, I was a perpetual daydreamer. I'm still a perpetual daydreamer, as Megan can attest to. It's so bad that in 7th grade, I spent a significant portion of my time in Mrs. Thompson's lunch detention. Among the breakfast club-looking rogue gallery of misfits and ne'er-do-wells, I sat paying the consequence, not for bullying or disruption, but for the serial neglect to remember to have my parents sign a small yellow slip of paper that acknowledged that they had seen my grades that week. Each week, the letter on that little slip of paper was an A, and there I sat, week in, week out, in detention, looking at lovely Mrs. Thompson's motherly face with the same charge leveled against me, forgetfulness. Each week, detention served to remind me to remember to get that slip signed. Each week, though, trust me, I fully intended to, and I forgot on Tuesday. Each week, I grew more and more indignant at the injustice of the system designed to ruin my lunches and prejudiced against all of the forgetful young boys of the world. But it's also a telling story, actually. As I grew older, my low prioritization of presence continued. I have encountered bosses, friends, girlfriends, a wife, and now kids who have begrudgingly exasperated, thrown up roadblocks to my attempts to take a shortcut through reality. Whether that was the reality of rules, the reality of relationships, or the reality of my own need to grow. Whether that was spacing out on getting grade slips signed, but that then turned into forgetting to get passports for trips. Daydreaming over lunch turned into forgetting other commitments and schedules for other people, not showing up when I was supposed to. My lack of presence was no longer boyish and charming, if it ever was. It was aggravating and indicated first to them and finally to me a strong self-interest and a lack of discipline to care for and prioritize the people I was around. It was through my own journey that I found presence is not just the act of being in the same room with somebody. It is the art of being with somebody while you're in the same room. And there's a huge difference between those two things. The practice of witness, of real presence, whether the somebody we are with is God, another human being, or simply ourselves, is a spiritual awareness of whole personhood, an openness and a desire for connection, to listen, to know, and to be known. It is what Jesus calls having eyes to see and ears to hear. Ever since human pride introduced suspicion between mankind and God in Genesis 1, something happened to our presence with God. Genesis 1 says we hid, even as God looked and continues to look for us. That same prideful self-interest created suspicion between man and woman, Adam and Eve, brother and brother, Cain and Abel, and eventually a deep insecurity even within ourselves, distance within. As we can see, when Cain falls into despair and self-pity, as he becomes the first isolated wanderer in the biblical story after murdering his brother, the act of distance created between him and his brother actually destroys and creates a rift within himself. Perhaps we too have become, in our day and age, fearful wanderers, departing into isolation, thinking it will save us, only to find it breeds a certain kind of hopelessness. Nicholas Kristof wrote in an op-ed for the New York Times this week that if researchers are correct, social isolation probably kills more people in the West each year than terrorists and murderers, and it costs the public enormous sums of money in unnecessary health costs. He goes on to say that one of the paradoxes of humanity is that as we've evolved to be social creatures, wealth drives us towards solitude. When we have the resources, he writes, we stop sleeping 8 to a hut and build a big house with high walls. And each family member has a private bedroom and bathroom. And then, to afford the mortgage, we work so hard that we never manage to have meals together. Kristof cites the fall of human institutions from churches to bridge clubs as contributing to a rampant increase of deaths of despair that rise in part because of extreme loneliness. He notes that the problem is an epidemic, but it is easily curable by one of the most widely available resources: simply human presence. Britain and Japan have now appointed ministers of loneliness. These are not pastor ministers, mind you. These are political cabinet members who oversee public-private partnerships that collectively knit millions of people together with programs like nature walks, songwriting workshops, and community litter pickups. Those of us with a deep curiosity and progressive early adopter mentality to technology do well to realize that it is the human body that is the ultimate end of all technology. In other words, you can't beat this, believe it or not. God's presence, his withness, was displayed perfectly. Where? In the body of Jesus. John 1, verses 1 and 2, some of probably the most famous lines of the whole Bible, say, the Word was first, the Word present to God, God present to the Word. The Word was God. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. God arrives to us as a body, as the best way to be present to us. With all of the body's limitations, all its messy feelings, all of its proclivities, hungers, needs, it is the chosen, the ultimate means by which God chose to be present. Our body, our human presence, is the best tool we have for connection, love, and belonging. And by and large, its inherent limitations are okay. They're actually good. Each is God's means for his gift to be given to us right now. So material aid, informational access, efficient tools all have their important places in growing human community, but never as a replacement for human presence. Just as a quick example, in the past few weeks, some of the team here at Alongside has been discussing the UMES food pantry together. And we concluded, in some ways, that it would be more efficient to feed bodies by asking everyone to simply just donate money for food. That way we can plan ahead, you can pick just the right amount, you can choose and you can pivot on what you buy. But we realized, no, this will not actually help form us into a people that are present for those with the deepest need in our community. Our acts of taking our kids with us, going to the store and buying a loaf of bread, calling our neighbors and forming communities of support for those who need food is the way that we can best embody the presence of God, to one another, even though it may be on some metric less efficient. We could have a repeating payment program on your phone, and that would get it all done. But it wouldn't create a deeper presence. It wouldn't form a life ritual, a fond memory. Who knows what seeds it may plant when we just begin that ritual of embodying the presence of feeding our neighbor rather than checking it and putting it on autopay. So sometimes we would be well to ask ourselves with these choices that we face, literally, let's be honest, every day in our culture. Every day there's a choice to be more embodied, more present, or less present. And there is always an argument to become less present. Am I choosing to be more efficient, or am I choosing simply to be less human? And in choosing to be less efficient, could I be choosing to be more human? So I don't have a long time. I just want to spend a couple minutes looking at two different ways that we lack this presence in our life, that we find, like me, becoming the daydreamer, that we can become forgetful. Often for me, a lack of presence comes from a restless sense of discontent with the present. I find myself searching for a better moment, a better circumstance, choices, relationships, sometimes just creating them in my head. Father Ronald Rollheiser relates this story about the Austrian poet Rilke, who at the height of his fame was once contacted by a young man from a small provincial town. The young man expressed his admiration for Rilke's poetry and told him that he envied him, envied his life in a big city, and envied a life so full of insight and richness. He went on to describe how his own life was uninteresting, provincial, small town, too dull to inspire insight and poetry. Rilke's answer was not sympathetic. He told the young man, if your life seems poor to you, then tell yourself that you are not poet enough to see and call forth its riches. There are no uninteresting places, no lives that aren't full of the stuff for poetry. What makes a rich life is not so much what is contained within each moment, but presence to that moment. Poetry, Rilke reminds us, is about being sufficiently alert to what's in the ordinary, the everyday. 250 years before Rilke, an 18-year-old boy by the name of Lawrence awoke to the ordinary when he sat present to a tree standing bare in the winter. He considered that with a little time, the leaves would be renewed, and after that, the flowers and fruit would appear. Herein he saw in the simplest way the death and resurrection that is inherent in the good news of Jesus and the nature of God's forgiveness and mercy just by being present to a tree. Converting to Christianity, he joined the Carmelite order. His whole life, he stayed a lay monk, never pursuing the priesthood, never pursuing to be a leader, working his whole life as a cook in the kitchen and making and repairing shoes for the other brothers. Brother Lawrence did not deny the usefulness of spiritual direction such as fasting, long times of silent prayer, and the like, but felt that the presence of God could be experienced everywhere, at all times of life, and preferred this constant encounter he found in the everyday acts of service. God's eternal presentness to him, when he made himself more present to God, through the practice of being present to those around him, serving their needs, observing what they would need before they even perhaps needed it, just as he considered the tree. And he said this, Lord of all pots and pans and things, make me saint by getting meals and washing up the plates. Which brings me to another way we often lose our presence to the moment. In my experience, in order to be present to others, even to God, you must be able to be honest with yourself, awake to your own inner world. When we lose presence to ourselves, I suspect it is a very different lack of presence than restlessness. Often its root is trauma, hurt, and active pain. This lack of being able to truly be present is an adopted or protective mechanism for us. It comes from examples modeled for us and experiences that have shaped us. Families that did not know how to express and process anger may have led and shaped us into people who rarely practice anger with any guidance. As a result, we may suddenly find that we lose ourselves in explosions of rage, only to realize we have no idea where it came from. If our families are highly motivated on achievement, we may have learned to prioritize accomplishment over relationship. Status as a means to finding belonging and love. Anybody? In these cases, could it be that God may be calling us to become more present to our anger, to our anxiety, or even to our ambition? Trained counselor and author Chip Dodd, in his book, Voice of the Heart, notes that as we become more present to ourselves, we find 8 root feelings: hurt, loneliness, sadness, anger, fear, shame, guilt, and gladness. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but only one of those feelings seems positive. Gladness is the only feeling in there I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good one. I want to feel that one. The whole point of my life will be to feel gladness. Because why would I want to feel shame, guilt, fear? Those are the things I run away from. But he says each feeling is actually not just a neutral tool, but a good part of us. Jesus felt each of these 8 feelings. They are building blocks to our human presence. To try and avoid these feelings, to bury them, to shortcut through reality, suggests that our feelings are liars, which, by the way, often the church has taught us to do and to think. But Dodd notes that abundant life, in the Christian sense, is to live fully. To live fully, he says, is not to always be happy or satiated. It is to courageously be willing to feel everything in your heart. Practicing presence is a grounding and sometimes jarring commitment to accept what is life on life's terms, so that our very humanity is no longer a monkey on our back. As Rolheiser puts it, we are away from ourselves. The trick is to come home. Perhaps when Jesus gathered with his 12 closest friends in an intimate presence in the upper room the night before he died, and instructs them to live in me, make your home in me, just as I do in you, to abide. Some of us know that verse as. He is calling them to embrace their full human presence, trying again to become present with God through the relationship with the body and person of Jesus. Even as they reckon with all of their feelings Jesus shared with them of sadness. I'm sure that night they were feeling sadness, some gladness to be together, hurt, anger, fear, deep loneliness, guilt, and shame. That wild night when the plan goes sideways in a way that would save us all. Perhaps the most holy thing that they did that night was simply to be there, as fully with each other, with themselves, and with the Father, letting all of it come in. After all, there are no shortcuts, as Peter found, as Judas found, and as Jesus found, each heading through a different kind of death that night. I've always remembered Richard Rohr's line, which goes something like this: whenever death is trusted, resurrection will take care of itself. In the words of the Mandalorian, this is the way, right? This is the Christian walk. This is what we're called to do. God is not asking for perfection. He's asking for presence. Jesus says famously, I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relationship is intimate and organic. The harvest is sure to be abundant. This fullness of experience, of complete and intimate presence with God, self, and others, does much more to explain the meaning of abundance, of that word abundance, than the trite word happiness or health, wealth, and whatever else pie in the sky prosperity thinking has taught us to believe about the meaning of the word abundant life. Abundance as presence explains why Jesus on the cross is more undone by the forsaken removal that he feels from God's presence than he is by all of the nakedness, shame, and physical torture that he encounters. And it is just possible that the practice of presence may cure what ails us. The prophet Isaiah wrote this, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness, and your gloom be as the noonday. So we have some time together to engage, to just sit with that flurry of whatever came up for you when you were considering and thinking about what the presence of Jesus might have felt like in that room, what it must have felt like for Judas to be in the presence of Jesus, knowing and planning what he was planning, for Peter as he confesses or does not confess Jesus is the Christ and deals with all of the things going on in those moments. Whatever is sticking with you as you've heard this, let's take some time to engage together. And when we do that, we're going to include our practice of Eucharist in the engagement. So I'm going to do something that I don't know if you've done here before. I've been here for, 8, 9, almost a year, which is amazing. This is a practice at my previous church that we would occasionally do. We would take the bread and the cup, and we would take it, and not take it just for ourselves. We would actually pass it to somebody next to us. We would say, this is the body broken for you, the blood poured out for you. So if you feel comfortable, make that a practice that you could try during this Eucharist time. At any point, whether beginning, middle, or end, and engage these 3 questions. Think of a time when you were not present. What happened? What do you think was going on? Is there an area in your life where you're being invited to be present? When have you noticed feelings as enemies more than friends? How could you respond differently? So take some time together and let's engage. right, so if you can begin to wrap up those conversations, maybe carry them on with folks afterward if you have a chance to. We just have a couple of announcements to give as we end our time. Hope that was productive, helpful, encouraging for you. As far as announcements go, let's see if I can pull them up here. Hold on. Are they going to come up? I had some images. Here we go. You can do it from there? All right. So don't forget, fall groups will be beginning at Alongsiders starting next month. And for those groups, we really are encouraging you to think and dream and consider what's on your heart that you could bring to the community to invite people into. It could be an interest, could be a hobby, could be a book club or a podcast that you listen to together. It could be a home group or a way to connect. What is something that you could do to begin to invite people in? Because as we know, church is not something that happens on Sunday. It's a people and a community that interact throughout the week. And so we're just really encouraging you to consider that. And if you can, get those requests in this week. At the kiosks out in the foyer or online, you could submit it doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to have this like bulletproof pitch. Just, hey, I'm here, I'm available. Here's the day and time of the week. Here's what we're thinking. Next reminder, we have Dignity Conference. I know you've heard about this quite a bit if you've come often. If you're brand new, this is going to be a conference on human care and leadership. Amazing speakers are flying. It's a national conference. It's also celebrating the 20th anniversary of Laundry Love. So please, that's this Friday and Saturday. Make it if you can. I think there may still be a few physical tickets available. I think we're capping it at 100. And if you can't get a physical ticket, there will be a live stream as well for that. Just a quick shout out. Beth has had, and all of you mentors that are working in the kids' environments, it's been wonderful to see everyone engaging with our children. If you have any interest in that, I know that there's still some room and availability, so please talk to Beth or on the kiosk in the back, you can let her know that you would like to be a mentor for our kids. And that's all I've got. So, just as a quick benediction for you all, I was reminded by Marilyn this week in the Forerunners in the middle of the week gathering, a verse in the Bible that just so fits well with this whole topic, Joshua 1:9. So let this be a prayer over you as you exit today. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So go, be present with others, finding greater awareness of God as he showers you with his loving attention. Love you guys.